The morning air was crisp and biting as Elliot Graves stood before the battered gates of Holleridge boarding school. The sun's first rays stretched hesitantly over the horizon, casting a muted gold glow that did little to soften the building's shattered visage. The once proud institution now resembled a wounded relic, its windows boarded, walls cracked, and paint peeled away like forgotten memories. Elliot's breath came out in short, visible puffs as he pulled his worn leather jacket tighter around himself. In his hands, his ever-present journal waited, its pages thick with observations, sketches, and remnants of a nightmare that refused to loosen its grip. He found a solitary spot on the cracked pavement, away from the small cluster of people who had begun to gather. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the journal to a fresh page. The weight of what had transpired over the past weeks clung to him like a second skin. Ghosts, both literal and figurative, had invaded their lives, surfacing wounds long buried. With deliberate strokes, he began to write, each word a tentative step toward understanding. The storm has passed, he penned, but the ruins remain. The voices linger, and so does the ache. Nearby, Maya Chen moved with quiet determination, her eyes bright with purpose. In what had become a makeshift archive room inside a nearby community center, she carefully unpacked boxes filled with artifacts recovered from the school's hidden chambers. Faded photographs, letters yellowed with age, a ragged doll missing one eye, all remnants of lives abruptly shattered. Each item was a testament to the children who had once filled those halls with laughter and tears, whose stories had been silenced by neglect and cruelty. Maya's fingers trembled as she lifted a fragile photograph of a group of children, their faces innocent yet shadowed by the passage of time. Whispering softly, she read aloud the names she had painstakingly uncovered: Eleanor, Thomas, Sarah. Her voice cracked with reverence and sorrow. This was no longer just history. It was a sacred trust to remember and honor those forgotten souls. They deserve to be known, she murmured. Their pain, their lives, must not be erased. Outside, the remaining crew gathered around a small fire pit stoked against the biting chill. The flames flickered and danced, casting elongated shadows that mingled with the weary faces of men and women forever changed by their shared ordeal. Jared Morales sat hunched, his tattooed arms wrapped tightly around his knees. For the first time since their escape, the facade of stoicism cracked. His voice was rough and hesitant as he broke the silence. I've been running from my demons for years, but in there, it was like they found me, dragged me back. His admission hung in the air, raw and unvarnished. Elliot met his gaze, the depth of understanding passing silently between them. Others nodded, the weight of their collective trauma settling over the group like a shroud. Yet amidst the darkness, a fragile spark of hope glimmered. The shared acknowledgement of pain was the first step toward healing. Claire Dunham, usually composed and pragmatic, reached out a steadying hand to Tommy Briggs, whose youthful eyes shimmered with a mix of fear and admiration. We made it through, she said softly, together. But even as warmth blossomed among the survivors, the building behind them remained a silent sentinel of sorrow. Its walls, scarred and impenetrable, held secrets no longer fully hidden but not fully revealed. A subtle wind stirred, carrying with it faint whispers that slipped through cracks and crevices, echoes of children's voices, soft and persistent. The presence lingered, a reminder that the past was never truly gone. Elliot's gaze shifted back to the school, the familiar ache settling deep within his chest. He knew that leaving this place would not mean the end of the haunting. The scars etched into his soul and those of his companions would follow them, shadows cast long into the future. Yet he also felt a quiet resolve, a determination to carry the stories forward, to bear witness. "Maya," he called softly, stepping toward the small crowd. "We have a responsibility now, to remember, to tell the truth. Not just for them, but for all of us." She nodded, eyes glistening with unspoken resolve. "Their stories will live. I'll make sure of it." The fire crackled, sending sparks swirling into the cold air, brief stars in the growing light. Around it, survivors found solidarity, a fragile but vital thread weaving them together. The storm that had ravaged their lives had passed, but the journey toward peace was only beginning. In the stillness, the school seemed to watch, its secrets settling into the shadows, waiting patiently for the next chapter to unfold. The teeth in the walls might have bitten deep, but the marks they left would not be forgotten. And somewhere, faint and distant, a whisper carried on the wind, a reminder that memory, like pain, endures. Elliot closed his journal with a slow breath, the pages filled with the weight of loss, hope, and the haunting truth. He turned away from Holleridge, the rising sun casting a pale glow over the battered facade, and took the first steps toward a future forever shaped by the past. The morning sun filtered weakly through the curtains of Elliot's small apartment, casting pale stripes across the cluttered room. He stirred beneath the thin blanket, his brow furrowed in restless sleep. A faint murmur tugged at the edges of his consciousness, the whispered voices, barely there but unmistakable. They seemed to seep through the cracked plaster walls, threading their way into his dreams. He bolted upright, breath shallow and quick. The echoes of children's laughter, fractured and distant, haunted the silence. Elliot's fingers trembled as he reached for the worn, leather-bound journal resting on the bedside table. Opening to the last page, he traced his own hurried scrawl, "The walls remember. So must I." Days had passed since the evacuation of the Holleridge boarding school. The building stood silent now, but silence brought no peace. For Elliot, the shadows followed him into every room, the memories clinging like cobwebs. The nightmares were relentless, a cruel reminder that the trauma, the collective pain, was not confined to the school's crumbling walls. He dressed slowly, pulling on his familiar leather jacket. Outside, the city hummed with indifferent life. Elliot's protective instincts, which had once focused on safeguarding his crew amid the supernatural chaos, now sought a new purpose. He had become a keeper of stories, a guardian of forgotten children whose voices still whispered in the dark. Across town, Jared Morales sat stiffly in a counseling office, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling with the faint aroma of coffee from the waiting room. His muscular arms rested on his knees as he recounted fractured memories, gunfire, screams, a different kind of battlefield. The horrors of war paled in comparison to the relentless torment of the schools, hauntings that had shattered his fragile skepticism. "I'm not used to asking for help," Jared admitted, voice low but steady. "But I can't keep carrying this alone. The ghosts, the memories, they don't let go." The counselor nodded, offering a calm presence as Jared's facade cracked. It was a small victory, a tentative step toward healing, but a victory nonetheless. Meanwhile, Maya Chen sat at her cluttered desk, surrounded by artifacts unearthed from the school's hidden rooms. Faded photographs, broken toys, and tattered diaries formed a mosaic of lives interrupted. Her fingers traced the name etched into a cracked porcelain doll's neck, a child lost to time but not forgotten. They deserve to be remembered, Maya whispered to herself, the weight of history pressing gently on her shoulders. She meticulously catalogued each item, preparing for the exhibition that would bring the school's dark past into the light. Her work was an act of defiance against oblivion. Late afternoon brought an unexpected visit. Tommy Briggs, the young apprentice with a keen sensitivity to the supernatural, arrived at Elliot's door, clutching a small notebook thick with sketches and notes. His eyes were wide but hopeful. "I wanted to show you," Tommy said softly, handing over the notebook. "These are things I saw, things the others missed." Elliot flipped through the pages, seeing the school through Tommy's eyes. Shadowy figures in corridors, the shapes of teeth embedded in walls, and faint outlines of children reaching out from the darkness. Outside, a chill wind stirred dry leaves against the porch, carrying with it a whisper that seemed both a warning and a promise. The lingering presence was far from gone. It waited, patient and sorrowful, bound by memory and pain. But inside Elliot, Jared, Maya, and Tommy, a fragile resolve had taken root. They would not let the past fade into silence. Night fell, and Elliot sat by the window, journal open on his lap. Each entry was a testament to survival, to remembrance, and to the enduring shadows that shaped their lives. The whispers in the walls had followed them home, but so had a spark of hope a chance to heal, to honor, and to face the lingering darkness with courage. As the city lights flickered beyond the glass, Elliot's voice broke the quiet. "We remember," he said, "and that is how we survive." Outside, the wind carried the faintest echo of a child's laughter, a reminder that some stories are never truly finished. The nights were restless for the entire crew. Dreams twisted with fragments of the boarding school, peeling wallpaper, the cold touch of unseen hands, the faint, maddening whispers that seemed to crawl beneath their skin. Even in the safety of their own homes, the haunting had followed. Elliot found himself pacing in his dimly lit living room, the journal's pages fluttering in the night breeze from an open window. The protective instinct that had governed his every move at Holleridge now compelled him to act beyond mere survival. He reached out to local historians, community members, anyone who would listen to the stories locked within those walls. Maya's exhibition was taking shape, a carefully curated collection of artifacts and narratives that wove together the fragmented past into a tapestry of remembrance. The process was both cathartic and painful. Each photograph, each toy, was a voice given back its name. Jared's journey was more solitary but no less vital. Therapy sessions peeled back layers of trauma, revealing the scars both visible and unseen. His confrontations with PTSD mirrored the battles fought within the school: fear, loss, and the desperate need to reclaim control. Tommy remained a beacon of youthful curiosity tempered by an acute awareness of the supernatural. His drawings captured the unseen, giving form to the formless shadows that haunted their lives. His friendship with Elliot grew stronger, a bridge between past and future. Together, they navigated the fragile boundary between memory and forgetting, between fear and healing. The lingering shadows were not merely remnants of a haunted building, but echoes of a collective trauma that demanded acknowledgement. Elliot's journal entries became a chronicle not just of events, but of emotions, grief, guilt, hope, and above all, the determination to ensure that the children who had suffered in silence would never be forgotten. The story was far from over. Though the boarding school stood silent, its walls no longer confined the presence. It had extended into their lives, a haunting both sorrowful and relentless. But within that haunting was a call to action, a reminder that memory was power, and remembrance a form of resistance. As Elliot closed his journal for the night, a whisper drifted through the quiet room, soft and clear: "Thank you." And for the first time in a long while, Elliot allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, healing was possible. Yet the shadows waited, patient and enduring, their secrets still whispered in the walls. The end was yet to come. Elliot Graves hesitated at the threshold of his childhood home, the weight of years pressing down like the heavy storm clouds gathering overhead. The house, once a place of fragile comfort, now seemed a mausoleum of memories, each creak and whisper a ghost of a past he had long tried to bury. The cracked wallpaper hung in tatters, its faded floral pattern barely clinging to the walls like the remnants of his fractured innocence. As he stepped inside, the scent of damp wood and stale air wrapped around him a familiar, unwelcome embrace. The hallway stretched before him, dim and narrow, lit only by the weak afternoon light filtering through grimy windows. His footsteps echoed softly, mingling with the distant rumble of thunder. Here, in this place, he had first felt the sharp sting of loss, the absence of his sibling. The silence after their laughter ceased. The memories pressed in, unbidden and relentless, as if the very walls remembered his pain. Elliot moved slowly, touching the banister with fingers that trembled not from cold, but from the surge of emotion. He paused before the door to his old bedroom, its paint chipped and faded. Inside, dust motes danced in the slanting light, settling over a room frozen in time. The bed was bare, the shelves empty save for the shadows cast by the late afternoon sun. He knelt, tracing the outline of a long-forgotten scuff on the floor, a silent testament to a childhood interrupted. That night, back in his temporary lodgings, Elliot pulled out his leather-bound journal. The pages were already filled with accounts of the Holleridge School's dark past, the whispered voices, the hidden rooms. But now, his entries grew more personal, raw. He wrote of the lingering weight of memory, how trauma was not a wound that healed with time, but a shadow that stretched long and deep. Meanwhile, in her cluttered apartment, Maya Chen sifted through a growing mountain of documents and photographs. The dim light of her desk lamp illuminated her determined face as she connected dots that had remained invisible for decades. Newspaper clippings told stories of other institutions' boarding schools, orphanages, reformatories where children had suffered in silence, their pain buried beneath official neglect and societal indifference. Her fingers hovered over a faded map dotted with locations, a pattern emerging that chilled her to the core. The horrors of Holleridge were no isolated case. They were threads in a tapestry of forgotten abuses that spanned the region. She reached for her phone, intent on sharing her findings with Elliot. Together, they were uncovering a legacy that demanded acknowledgement. Days later, Elliot and Maya stood before the boarded-up Holleridge School, the rain falling in steady sheets that blurred the edges of the world. The building loomed like a spectre, its windows dark and unyielding. Water traced slow, tear-like paths down the cracked glass, mirroring the sorrow etched into their faces. They spoke little, the silence between them filled with the weight of what they had uncovered. Yet, in that quiet, a shared resolve took root. They would not let the stories be forgotten. The children who had suffered Harand in countless other places deserved remembrance and justice. Elliot's thoughts drifted back to his journal, to the pages filled with pain and hope. He understood now that memory was a double-edged sword, a burden and a lifeline. To heal, the past must be faced and honored, no matter how dark the shadows it cast. As the storm raged on, Elliot closed his eyes and made a silent promise, not just to the spirits haunting the walls of Holleridge, but to himself. He would carry the weight of memory, wield it as a shield and a beacon, guiding him through the darkness toward a fragile dawn. The chill of the morning lingered in the air as Elliot Graves made his way through the skeletal remains of what was once the boarding school's main hallway. The renovation had stalled, not just because of structural concerns, but because the weight of unseen wounds pressed heavily on every soul involved. Paint peeled in curling strips, and the faint scent of mildew clung to the cracked plaster. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe somewhere in the shadows. Tommy Briggs shuffled behind Elliot, his boots scuffing softly against the dirt-strewn floor. The young apprentice had been quieter than usual these past few days, his usual bravado replaced by a tentative reserve. Elliot caught the hesitant glances Tommy cast toward the dark corners of the building, where whispers seemed to curl just beyond hearing. Elliot stopped near a half-demolished wall, turning to face Tommy. "You okay, kid?" Tommy swallowed hard, his throat tight. I wanted to talk," he said, his voice low. "Not just about the work, about everything." Elliot nodded, his weathered face softening. "Let's step outside for a bit," he suggested, leading Tommy toward the cracked windowed door that opened onto a narrow courtyard. The dull light filtered through bare branches, casting skeletal shadows across the cracked concrete. Once outside, Tommy exhaled deeply. Ever since we started tearing down those walls, those hidden rooms, I keep hearing things. Voices. Sometimes they're just whispers, but other times, it's like they're calling me. Elliot leaned against the rough brick, the leather jacket creaking softly. "You're not the only one," he admitted. "I hear them too." Tommy looked up, eyes wide. "How do you deal with it?" Elliot's gaze dropped to the cracked ground, memories flooding him unbidden. The loss of his sibling, the guilt that clawed at him for decades, it all converged in that moment. "I don't always do it well," he confessed, "but I try to face it, not run away." The younger man nodded slowly, drawing a shaky breath. "Sometimes I wonder if it's all in my head, or if the building remembers. Like it's holding on to every scream, every tear." "It does," Elliot said quietly, "and so do we." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of raised voices. Maya, Chen, and Jared Morales stood near the entrance to the site, their figures tense as they exchanged heated words. "You're not listening," Maya said sharply, her glasses catching the light. "This isn't just about finishing a job. These children, these stories, they matter." Jared's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to keep us alive, Maya. You think I don't feel this? But we can't fix the past by chasing ghosts." Elliot sighed, watching the clash of ideals. Both were right and wrong in equal measure. The past could not be ignored, yet survival demanded pragmatism. Later that afternoon, Elliot found himself alone in his makeshift office, a small room cluttered with journals and faded photographs. The sun cast long, somber shadows as he opened his own journal and began to write. Tommy's words echoed in his mind, stirring memories he had long tried to bury. The faces of children lost, the ache of guilt for his sibling's death, they all pressed against the fragile walls of his resolve. In a quiet moment of resolve, Elliot rose and joined the small group gathered in the courtyard. Tommy had arranged a modest memorial, a circle of worn toys and forgotten trinkets discovered in the hidden rooms. Each item was a silent testament to a story once silenced. Maya placed a faded doll gently among the collection, her eyes glistening. Jared stood nearby, his usual tough exterior softened by the solemnity of the moment. Elliot addressed the group quietly. "We can't change what happened here, but we can remember. We can honor the lives behind these walls." The crew nodded, a fragile hope threading through the shared sorrow. Though the shadows still whispered and the building's teeth seemed to gnash just beyond sight. In that moment, memory became a shield, light against the darkness. Yet as night fell and the wind stirred the hollow halls, Elliot knew the scars hidden beneath the surface were far from healed. The past was a living thing here, and its teeth were still waiting to bite.